Get a bunch of watch collectors together in real life, on YouTube, in comment sections, or in somewhere like Facebook, and very quickly we will all start complaining about limited releases. Often we quite like the watches, it's just the release that really annoys us. Well, I just saw what I think is the best limited release of 2022 and an archetype of everything I like in a limited release. Let me talk to you about that. And before I go on, what I should tell you is I actually don't like the watch very much at all. Hi, if this is your first time here, I'm Pete McConville. This is my channel, and I tend to talk and think and look at watches, but from a slightly off-center point of view. If that sounds like what you're interested in, hit the like and subscribe and notify button, all the things that everyone else tells you to do, and we'll see more of each other. Now, as I said on the introduction, we in the watch community don't like limited releases very much. Often we really love the watch, but it's the release, it's the way it's handled that really annoys us. Today, I'm talking about the opposite. What I want to talk about today is a watch I stumbled upon purely by accident. That is the new Breitling Endurance Pro Ironman World Championship. Now, before I go on, something I need to be really clear about. I don't like this watch very much. I have never really fallen in love with the Breitling Endurance Pro dial layout. It's too busy, that's too hectic. I don't understand why they made some of the choices they did about cutting off dials and everything. But you know what? That's their call. They made that. It's just not a watch for me. But this release is absolutely brilliant. I'll tell you why. What makes a good limited release versus a bad limited release really hovers around three areas. It is the three things we seem to hate about limited releases. And if you get rid of those, it can become a good one. The three things that we seem to hate about limited releases of watches is one, quite often they're manipulative. They rely upon fear of missing out. They rely upon holding a figurative gun to the head of the collector, saying, you better hurry up and get this now, because if you wait a second, it's all going to be gone and you'll be beaten by the bots. And we feel compelled to get in fast and buy quicker than we should. And on top of that, the release will often be like teased and there'll be hype building up. And all in all, we just feel manipulated into buying something that maybe we wouldn't otherwise buy. The second reason that we tend not to like limited editions is so many of them are just lazy. A limited edition should be in some way special. It should stand out from the crowd somehow. It should be, as a lot of people have said, it should be remarkable and collectible in its own right, not just because someone put a sort of an artificial boundary around what would otherwise be just another dial color and say, we're only making 100 of these. And the third thing we tend not to like about limited releases or limited editions or special editions is they often feel inauthentic. They feel forced. They feel completely made up, divorced from the history of the brand, what the brand's trying to do, what the thing that is being recalled. Like there might be a collaboration that just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't fit properly. And it just, as I said, it feels artificial, forced, and like sort of the commercial side of it is just a little bit too obvious. Now, let's bring back to the Breitling Endurance Pro Ironman. Actually, it turns out there's a whole collection of these. I didn't even know there was a collection. I knew there was one of these, but the other two I'd never seen before. And I'll talk about why I think they are so great as limited releases. I'll just stress that. And the first thing is, there's no manipulation going on. This latest one, the Endurance Pro, no press release, no marketing, nothing. I found this because I was looking in a completely different place at a completely different suite of products and stumbled into, because I was on the Ironman site looking at Ironman races and looking at some of their back catalogue of merch, and I saw that there was a Breitling section. I followed the breadcrumbs and found something that is not advertised anywhere else. There is no hype behind this. There's nothing driving this. There's no FOMO being created by a big, Hadinky launch and worry about bots catching me here. This was just something I stumbled on. And for me, that is the essence of the perfect limited release. I don't feel like I'm being manipulated to buy this at all. I almost feel like they don't want to sell it to me. I had to uncover it. That, to me, is, as I said, perfect. The second issue about limited releases is that they're often, as I've said before, lazy redials of an otherwise, fairly generic change. And that cannot be leveled, particularly the Ironman World Championship edition here. First off, the dial is a change. It is remarkably different to anything they've done before. This really quite aggressive yellow, bringing in... Look, as I said, colorways I don't particularly like. I understand why they've gone with the yellow. I understand why they've gone with the Ironman branding and the colors that brings. I don't particularly like it. I wouldn't want to buy it, but I understand why they've done it. And that alone may or may not make this a worthy limited edition. But look a bit closer and what do you see? Now, if you're not really familiar with the Endurance Pro line, you might not realize this, for the first time ever, is not Breitling, that kind of resin plasticky thing that all the other Endurance Pros are made of. This is titanium, totally out of the blue, with no press release, with no media whatsoever. Breitling have dropped a limited edition run of 200 titanium watches that they've never made in this material before. And it is currently only on this one watch. There is no way you can accuse this watch of being a lazy redial that doesn't deserve being a special edition. They've, like an entirely new case material just for this watch. I think that's a really solid foundation for a limited or special edition. Now, I will guarantee you there will be more of these titanium watches in future. Maybe it'll become a standard line. Maybe it'll find its way over to the aerospace or something. I don't know. But as I said, for a limited release, a limited edition, there's a perfect example of what we'd expect brands to do. And finally, there's this idea of being inauthentic, of being kind of forced, fake, made up. And I don't feel that with this watch. Breitling has been forging a relationship with triathlon for some time. They've been using triathletes as brand ambassadors. Breitling itself has a long history of sports sponsorship. This is a chronograph, which is kind of where Breitling sits. It's just, for me at least, and I'll say this as both a Breitling fan, I suppose, and as a triathlete who's done a couple of Ironman, this kind of just feels right. This feels like the sort of thing, as I've finished a triathlon and I'm buying my finishers kit and I'm spending all that money in the big Ironman tent, this is exactly the sort of product I would expect to see. And it's exactly the sort of product that I'm likely to spend my cash on. So it just feels like the kind of thing that Breitling should be making with Ironman. And as I said, as a result, it feels authentic to me. It doesn't feel fake or forced. So to wrap this up, I really need to stress this. I'm not a fan of this watch. Despite being a Breitling fan, despite being an Ironman fan, I am not buying the Breitling Endurance Pro. This video is not a critique of that watch. Well, maybe it is a bit of a critique, but it's certainly not intended to make you all want to race out and buy this watch. It's not intended to make you think any better of this watch. It's actually about the release, the process Breitling went through or didn't go through to make it available to people, and how I feel that this sort of thing, how limited releases that aren't screamed from the rooftops, but rather sneak out through alternative marketing chains aimed at very discrete niche people, niche groups, so that they can find the watch and only they can find the watch, is exactly how a limited release should be done. I'm not being forced into buying it. I don't have this like intense marketing pressure to get in now. I'm not competing with people that frankly have no interest in the watch itself, but are only there trying to flip it later. As I said, the way this release has been handled, I think is the archetype of how all limited releases should be done. Likewise, I don't think you can accuse this watch of being lazy. This is quite the reverse. This is what you want a special release to be, or a limited release to be. Something special, something that's completely different to the way every other watch in that family might be. In this case, they've gone so far as a completely new case material. I think that is the sort of thing we like to see in our limited releases. And the last thing, as I said, would be a limited release or a special release, which feels natural. That feels like this is how it should be. I can see how we got here beyond merely, oh, there was an opportunity to, like at the end of a run, to stamp out another 500 with a different dial number, number them, and then send them off. This feels more like it's part of what the brand is trying to be and do. And I think that's a model for other brands. One thing that's really interesting here is I think this is a great release because I just stumbled upon it. And I'm calling this the best limited release that I know of, because there could be other great limited releases that have been done. But the thing that makes them great is that I don't know about them. So if you're aware of other releases that are as good or better, let me know. Let us all know in the comments below, and we'll talk about some great limited releases, things that are so under the radar, they're virtually subterranean, and bring them into the light and have a look at some good stuff. Anyway, I've been Pete McConville. This has been my channel, and I'll see you later. Bye.